The top business stories live from the Sky newsroom. Primark's chief executive Paul Marchant resigns following allegations about behaviour towards a woman. Can the Prime Minister avoid the worst of Trump's tariffs on Wednesday as Asian markets sell off ahead of so-called Liberation Day? Plus, a German aerospace company feels the gravity of the situation as Europe's latest satellite launch explodes just 40 seconds after takeoff. Very good morning and welcome to Business Live on this Monday with me, Darren McCaffrey. Going to begin with the chief executive of Primark, who's resigned after admitting an error of judgment in his behaviour towards a woman in a social environment. Paul Marchant had stepped down with immediate effect following an investigation. Well, Emma Birchley has been following this for us. Emma, just bring us up to date about what we know of these allegations and indeed this resignation.
Yeah, it's simply that phrase you just said there. It relates to his behaviour towards a woman in a social environment. No more detail than that. What we do know, though, is that Paul Marchant has cooperated with the investigation. He'd run the high street chain since 2009, so now standing down, certainly not a good end to his time with Primark. ABF, Associated British Foods, who are the parent company of Primark, have said that he acknowledged his error of judgment and accepts that his actions fell below the standards expected by ABF, and he has apologised to the individual involved. He's apologised to the board, and he has apologised to his colleagues. Now, there has been a statement from George Weston, who's the chief executive of ABF. He said, "I'm immensely disappointed. At ABF, we believe that high standards of integrity are essential. Colleagues and others must be treated with respect and dignity. Our culture has to be and is bigger than any one individual," and they go on to say that they're continuing to support that individual in this case. So a sorry end to his time at Primark. Before that, he was Chief Operating Officer at New Look. He'd also had senior roles at other high street retailers, Debenhams, Topman, River Island. But he played a pivotal role at the helm during the expansion of Primark into Europe and the US. Now it has 550 stores across 17 countries. Today, though, when the markets opened, there was a quick response. Within minutes, the share price had fallen by 3.5%. And this is at a time when actually the retail figures haven't been so good for Primark. The Christmas quarter saw sales fall by 6%. So not a great time for Primark, and this only adding to that. And just to say finally that it'll be ABF's finance director who will now act as interim boss of Primark.
OK, Emma, with the very latest there. Thank you very much indeed, Emma Birchley. Let's speak to Shutri Tripathi Chopra, who is editor-in-chief of the Financial News and Private Equity News. Very good morning to you. We were just reflecting there, weren't we, with Emma, just the scale of Primark. I mean, it is a massive high street name. I think it's the largest clothes retailer in the country.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, absolutely. It's the biggest retailer in the country. It has, they say that if sales at Primark don't do well, then the whole sector's in trouble. Marks and Spencer has really struggled, fighting for customers with Primark. So this is a huge, huge deal for the company. Paul Marchant was a big name for the retail sector. I mean, just his appointment at the time in 2009 was massive. This was 16 years ago. He was taking over from the very founder of Primark, Arthur Ryan, and he has done this all his life, pretty much. He left school at 16 to join a menswear retailer. Then he had stints at Debenhams and River Island. At Debenhams, he became a director at just 29. He's and even at Primark, he did a solid job of expanding Primark into the UK in and in various international locations. So this definitely doesn't come at the best time for Primark, which is struggling. You know, this was in January when they reported their sales. It was their first fall in sales since the pandemic, and Primark, like its rivals, does not offer online shopping, so it definitely does struggle, as all the retailers around the world are really ramping up their online presence. So I'm sure the investors and shareholders are asking a lot of questions at this moment.
Yeah, they definitely are. And as you've reflected on, you know, he's been around for 16 years. There's not many chief executives, particularly at big firms like Primark, who've can claim to have been around for that long.
Absolutely. He was known to be a safe pair of hands, and was known to be quite the stalwart in the industry. When he taught people, listen to him. His strategies have definitely worked for Primark, and we all know that Primark is the crown jewel in Associated British Foods empire. So this is a huge deal for the company. But that said, Primark and Associated British Foods is a well-oiled machine. They really know what they're doing, and the interim CEO Owen Tong is again a very safe pair of hands. He's worked at M&S and Greenco, and he's known for his strategies and his focus on finance. So while shareholders and investors are going to be asking a lot of questions, it'll be interesting to see how Primark and ABF recover from this.
Well, and just finally on that, as you say, there's now a temporary or interim CEO. Are we expecting any major change in direction for Primark? Because again, interestingly, they've not adopted, which I think almost every other retailer in the world has done, a proper online platform. Do you think Primark will kind of carry on doing what it's doing, or may well change a little bit under new leadership?
I expect they will try to do something. They need to prove to investors that they are a solid business. Sales aren't where it should be, and then they have their CEO of 16 years resigning. So they will have to think of a change in strategy to reassure investors and continue a sales streak that puts them on par with retailers who are expanding or really ramping up their online presence all throughout the world, essentially.
OK, Shutri, really appreciate your time this morning there from Financial News and Private Equity News Editor-in-Chief. Thank you. Now, Downing Street has claimed that the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, held productive discussions about an economic prosperity deal on a call with US President Donald Trump last night. It comes as the government hopes to avoid looming US tariffs. Washington is expected to unveil a series of worldwide sanctions on Wednesday, which President Trump has branded Liberation Day. Economists say the move would hammer the UK, its growth, and could lead to further tax increases in an autumn budget. Let's speak to the Professor of Geopolitics and Strategy at the Institute for Management's Business School. That's Simon Evenett. Very good morning to you, Simon. First of all, let's just talk through what we do know. We know there are going to be tariffs on aluminium and steel, I think at 25%. And yet there are things that we don't know, which is essentially further tariffs be announced on Wednesday. Is that right?
That's right. All we know at the moment is that there will be tariffs, and presumably they have to be big enough. Otherwise, you can't market this as Liberation Day. Beyond that, everything is pretty much unclear. Lots of fog emerged over the weekend in terms of the deliberations within the White House. It looks like they went back to the drawing board on the design of this. And as usual, the last person to speak to the president apparently has his ear. So I think there's a huge amount of uncertainty in advance of Wednesday's announcement, other than the fact that there will be shock and awe.
Yeah, and he talked about, I think, Asia on Air Force One. We know he's not a big fan of Canada or indeed of the European Union. So this could be quite widespread, couldn't it? And we're expecting at least some of those places, not least Canada and the EU, to respond with retaliatory tariffs.
So the scope could indeed be very broad-ranging. The president has widened them. Last week, his team were talking about hitting 15 trading partners. The president has said it could go wider than that. Now, of the big players that he could hit, the European Union, China, and the neighbors Canada and Mexico, at least 3 of them, all but Mexico, have said they will hit back. And they are planning to hit back. So this could then escalate, and we'll see where that ends up.
What about us here in the UK? The argument from us is that actually when it comes to goods, we've got a pretty balanced trading relationship with the United States. We know the Prime Minister's been on the phone, but, you know, people in Whitehall, political newspaper hacks seem to think that the UK government don't think there'll be any exceptions made for the UK before Wednesday.
I think it's unlikely that particular exceptions would be made for the UK. The UK does have a digital sales tax, which the Americans take severe umbrage to, and in particular this administration. And there'll be other things that are in the area of sort of selling drugs to the NHS, which have been a long-standing American bugbear. So I think it's unlikely that Britain will be spared.
And just in terms of what the impact will be on our economy, because, again, it's not going to be as big as it is elsewhere. We're not a massive manufacturing base like some European countries, for example. But we are also a very open economy, aren't we? And so we will feel or be buffeted around by those winds, if you like.
That's right. I mean, the downside is, of course, some British exporters, many may get hit with higher taxes that they'll have to pay. But if the taxes levied on the EU are even higher and China even higher, that may even create, ironically, commercial opportunities for British exporters as others get hit even more. And so that's the nature of these uneven tariffs, is that in some sense you can reduce some of the downside by gaining market share against other firms who come from countries which have been hit even more.
Well, isn't that, I suppose, the final point in many ways, Simon, is that when you look at this, you know, when tariffs were imposed in China in the past, lots of the manufacturing base simply moved to Vietnam or was kind of rerouted through different countries just to avoid those tariffs. At the end of the day, I mean, what do you think of what President Trump's trying to achieve here? We've been playing a report today from Mark Stone, our US correspondent, talking about the return of manufacturing to places like West Virginia, particularly when it comes to steel and aluminium. There is a method to the madness, if you like, in the sense that there is a rationale behind all of this. Whether it'll work or not is a whole other question.
I'm not so sure that there's much of a method behind this at all. I think there's a whole series of strongly held convictions that if you raise import taxes, firms will want to invest in the United States. But given the drama and the uncertainty over there at the moment, I think many boards will think very carefully before they decide to deploy dollars or pounds into the US economy at this stage. I'm not sure they're going to see much of a manufacturing payoff. The last China tariffs, which they put in place during President Trump's first term, did not do much for US manufacturing.
Simon, really interesting stuff. Thank you very much indeed for your time. And of course, we're going to have continuing coverage here on Sky in the lead up to Wednesday and those tariff announcements about the impact it could well have. And of course, on Wednesday, we'll have full comprehensive coverage as those tariffs are announced, the impact it will have on the global economy and indeed on us here in the UK. Well, let's stay actually with the US and indeed with President Trump, because we all know about his love of golf. It is not a secret. Neither is his dream to host apparently the game's Open Championship at Turnberry in Scotland. But the boss of the golf's governing body has told Sky News it won't be happening unless the venue becomes commercially viable. Paul Kelser has more.
There are two things we know Donald Trump loves: golf and deal-making. But his dream of bringing the two together with a staging of the Open Championship at his Turnberry links in Scotland may have to wait, according to the chief executive of the game's governing body.
The last time we were at Turnberry was back in 2009. We had, I think, about 120,000 people there. These days, a modern Open Championship caters for 250,000 people plus. And so we need the road and rail infrastructure to get our fan base there. We need hotel accommodation for the 60,000 bed nights that we need to stage our championship. And it's challenging, that venue.
So it sounds like, in language perhaps the President might understand, it's not a good enough deal for the R&A.
Well, those commercial considerations are one of the factors, as I've said, that we would build into our thinking.
Politics matters too. Donald Trump has never been slow to use golf events as a political platform.
So this is a letter from His Majesty the King.
But the R&A's position might disappoint Sir Keir Starmer, looking for leverage in his own deal with the President.
He's a beautiful man, a wonderful man.
Turnberry even got a mention in the King's invitation for a state visit delivered in the Oval Office. The R&A would prefer the focus to be on the game and is hopeful of an imminent truce in its own trade war between the US PGA Tour and the Saudi-funded Live Golf League that split the men's professional game, delivering millions more to players while turning some fans off.
There's been too much talk about cash and not enough talk about competition and courses and all the other wonderful things that underpin our sport. So we're optimistic for some positive change on that front.
Making the most of the Open matters because the R&A uses the income to support the grassroots game, still enjoying a post-COVID boom.
There are now more than 62 million golfers, more than ever before. 40-odd million are playing golf regularly on 9 and 18-hole golf courses. Another 20 million are playing what we would call non-traditional formats, driving ranges, adventure golf, simulator golf. So the game is actually in rude health.
The Open will return to Portrush in Northern Ireland this summer, leaving the game's most powerful fans' ambitions still frustrated. Paul Kelso, Sky News.
Just a little bit of breaking news coming in from the Press Association in the last couple of minutes, and that is that the King is preparing for a usual working week, which includes his public engagements, following that short stay in hospital at the end of last week on Thursday. You may remember he cancelled a planned visit to Birmingham on Friday on medical advice after spending a short period of time in hospital as he continues to undergo treatment for his cancer. We had expected him to return to work this week. That was certainly the indication Buckingham Palace had given. And now we seemingly have confirmation from the Press Association that the King is preparing for his usual working week, which will include public engagements following that short stay in hospital on Thursday. Now let's have a look at some of the rest of the day's business news now. And Thames Water has announced that it'll be moving into phase 2 stage of their equity raise with US investment firm KKR. The terms of the deal are expected to be finalised by the second quarter of this year, but there's still no guarantee an agreement will be reached, with proposals still subject to further scrutiny. Elon Musk has admitted feeling the pressure of his new job at the Department of Government Efficiency, claiming it is costing him a lot. Tesla shares hit a record high in December, but has since fallen by 45%, with his own wealth dropping by $100 billion this year, according to Bloomberg. But the richest man in the world does believe that long-term Tesla stock will do fine. And the first orbital rocket to take off from mainland Europe crashed soon after launch. The unmanned Spectrum rocket, built by German company Isars Aerospace, warned that the flight could end prematurely, but maintained that the first test flight met all their expectations, achieving a great success, producing extensive data that scientists say they can still learn from. And just a reminder, you can keep up to date with all the business news by just scanning the QR code that's on your screen right now to access our money blog on the Sky News app at any time of the day. And a little bit more breaking news, and this is returning to our top story today, which is in relation to Marine Le Pen. Well, a French court has ordered that Marine Le Pen is banned from running for office for 5 years with immediate effect. So Marine Le Pen, a sentence essentially has been banned from running, if you like, for public office for 5 years with immediate effect. And she has also been jailed for 4 years, of which 2 of these will be suspended, and in addition to that, will have to pay a €100,000 fine. So quite significant news emerging from France. We know that she had and is the front runner essentially to become the next French president. That election not due for a couple of years, but now she has been banned with immediate effects from running for office in France, and that also she is being sentenced to 4 years in prison, of which 2 will be suspended. She'd been found guilty of embezzling European funds to finance our hard-right French party, the National Rally. As I say, the court decided to hand down this sentence in the last couple of minutes. She had been seen leaving the courtroom early after she had been found guilty. The presidential election is due to be held in 2027, so there is no sense that she will be able to run for that presidency in 2 years' time, given the fact that she's been banned for 5 years with an immediate effect. Now, she does have the ability to appeal this sentence, but it is a pretty harsh sentence, sentenced to 4 years in prison, 2 of which will be suspended. And this will have a significant impact on French politics. We've also heard from effectively the parliamentary leader, Jordan Bardella, who says that Marine Le Pen has been unjustifiably condemned, that it is French democracy that is being executed today. But as I say, this will have a significant impact. She was the front runner to become the next French president. She has run for that election many times, increasing her vote, it must be said, with every single election. She was in the runoff against the current French president, Emmanuel Macron, just a couple of years ago. And this effectively rules her out. The French president, a significant figure, not just in European but global affairs. There is, or had been, little doubt that if Marine Le Pen had have won the French presidency, she would have taken France in a very different direction from what we've seen under Emmanuel Macron. She's someone, as I say, who is on the hard right of politics, who is not essentially pro the European Union, for example, and has been accused in the past of being quite friendly towards Vladimir Putin. But that looks now very unlikely. She will be able to appeal this decision, but quite significant news emerging from that French court in the last couple of minutes. That is that Marine Le Pen has effectively been banned from public office for 5 years and has been sentenced to 4 years in jail, 2 of which will be suspended. And of course, we'll bring you up to date with more of that news as it happens here on Sky. But let's talk about the markets if we can. Fears over the severity of US tariffs have plunged Asia markets into turmoil overnight, with equities in major markets also closing on the downside. Last week, of course, President Trump hinted at concessions for some countries, but overnight he singled out Asia for its trade practices. Futures currently point to a continued sell-off in the US, with the Nasdaq 100 and the S&P 500 pointing to a lower opening later today. Well, Anna McDonald is the investment manager at Aubrey Capital Management and has got the very latest on this. Anna, again, we're getting used to this roller coaster ride of the markets up and down at the talk of tariffs.
Yes, it's quite extraordinary. We've seen the Japanese index down sharply today. Now, they're very export-led as an economy, so it's not perhaps a huge surprise, but the news keeps on rolling on. Is it going to be quite nuanced and specific tariffs, or is it going to be actually quite blanket tariffs? The news seems to change all the time.
And we do just kind of have to get used to this, don't we, Anna, essentially? There is little doubt that President Trump is, in part, using this as a negotiating tactic, the threat of tariffs, and that means it could well go on for the next 3.5 years.
Yeah, well, for example, he's talked now about imposing 25 to 50% secondary tariffs on, and that's for countries that import and use Russian oil. So He's doing that because he says that he wants Putin to stop obstructing any kind of peace process together with Ukraine. So that, yes, it seems to be a negotiating tactic. But it's pretty unclear, is Trump trying to raise a lot of external tax revenues in the US to pay for tax cuts? Is he trying to bolster domestic manufacturing in the US? That will take time, and in the meantime will cause US consumers quite a lot of pain on the inflation side. He said he doesn't care if the costs of cars go up in the US. That's quite alarming, I think, to many investors.
OK, Anna, we're going to have to leave it there due to this breaking news. Really appreciate your time. As always, from Edinburgh, Anna MacDonald there. Let's return to that breaking news around Marine Le Pen. Adam Parsons is live for us. Adam, a significant day for France and quite a harsh or quite a powerful punishment, I should say.
Yeah, really powerful, Darren. A 5-year period of ineligibility. Effectively, Marine Le Pen's career suddenly lies in tatters. She will not be allowed to run in the 2027 presidential election. She has also been given a 4-year prison sentence, 2 of that suspended and 2 of which will be served with her wearing an electronic bracelet. She's been fined 100,000 euros. Her party, the National Rally, have been fined 2 million euros. A whole series of MEPs and figures within the party have faced these fines, these suspended sentences and these bans from running for public office. This is depending on your perspective, this is either a humiliation for the National Rally, or there will be those who are going to say that this is an abuse of democracy, that a court has gone too far. No doubt Le Pen will appeal this sentence, but as things stand, Darren, she cannot run for the presidential election in which she had been, just narrowly, the favourite.
OK, Adam, for the time being, thank you very much indeed. That breaking news, Marine Le Pen jailed for 4 years and banned from office for 5 years. Adam will continue to have live coverage of the story at midday here on Sky News. Stay tuned for that. I'm back, of course, at 4:30 this afternoon with more Business Live. I'll see you then. Do stay tuned to Sky News.